Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Dinozor Gaming, where we learn to be a better player. Today we're going to be doing a very short video. Don't be alarmed by the massive foreheads you see in front of you. This is actually a reveal video for the next set in Star Wars Unlimited. This weekend we were shown the 6th set, Secrets of Power. And these two, of course, being Palpatine and Amidala, are going to be the spotlight leaders. So let's quickly jump in. We don't want to waste anybody's time here, of course. And the new keywords this set, just like every other set, there we have like a couple of keywords. This time we only have two. We have plot and we have disclose. And I think it's better off if I explain these as we show you the cards. So let's take a look at, for example, a plot card first. We have Cat Bane being a great example. A 5-cost 4/5 Underworld Bounty Hunter, slightly below curve in terms of stat, but when played you may defeat a unit with 2 or less remaining HP. And plot, when you deploy a leader, you may play this card from your resources, paying its cost. Replace it with the top card of your deck. So when you first read plot, I imagine, like many of us, the first thing that comes to your mind is Smuggle. This plays very, very similar to the Smuggle. Of course, however, you cannot play this whenever you want. It's only when you actually deploy your leader. And what's more important and interesting is that there is no separate cost for plot. Whatever the card's basic cost is, that's how much you pay. And that is actually pretty interesting. Of course, it's going to depend on the power level of the cards themselves. But if you think about it, when you're playing a leader, for example, that deploys much later on the, let's say, the 7 or 8 cost turn, when you deploy your leader, you can play as many plot cards as you want, assuming you can pay the cost. So if you have 3 of them in your resource, you can play all 3, replace all 3, and that is a massive amount of action compression. You're doing 3 to 4 actions worth of plays in a single action. And after that, all you really will end up doing is attacking with your leader and claiming the initiative. Just being able to manipulate the action economy that way could definitely give you a massive advantage. And on top of that, similar to the Smuggle, it gives you a way to play cards that are not in your hand, that are from your resource row, and it's some sort of hand advantage, which is something that this game needs a little bit more of. The next keyword, we're going to take a look here at Cyril Karn. This keyword is disclose, and disclose works in a very interesting way. It gives an element of bluffing or playing with your opponent, so to speak. So for example, Cyril says, on attack, you may disclose red, red, black, or aggression, aggression, villainy, however you want to read it. And when you meet the criteria, in this case, attack, if you show those cards from your hand to your opponent, you get to do a bonus effect. And in this case, on attack, if you show your opponent any combination of cards that have at least 2 red aspects and 1 black, you get to choose a unit and deal 2 damage to it unless your opponent discards a card. Disclose is very interesting because you get to show your opponent whatever card you want in your hand. You can either show them a card that will change how they play, or maybe you'll show them a card and then immediately resource it next turn, so they'll start playing around it even though you don't have it anymore. Sometimes you just won't want to disclose because you don't want to show your opponent what you have in your hand. Obviously, that depends on the power of the disclose effect. So before we check out the rest of the disclose and plot cards, let's see what the spotlight leaders are, because they are very important with these 2 mechanics. So the first one is going to be Chancellor Palpatine, a 7-cost deploy 6/8 leader, who on his leader side says action, pay 1 and tap, search the top 5 cards of your deck for a card with plot, reveal it and draw it. That is a pretty good effect. We've seen plenty of pay 1 to essentially draw 1 in the game before, but most of the time they have had very convoluted requirements or needed you to attack with something, have a lot of units in play. This time the condition is simply that you're looking at the top 5 and searching a card with plot. And if there are enough plot cards, this basically reads pay 1, draw 1, except that the draw itself is whatever you want from your top 5. That is a very good effect, very strong effect. Once again, adding more card drawing to the game, which is fantastic. That is already what blue villainy wants. However, what makes this leader extremely interesting is that when deployed, the next card you play using plot this phase costs 3 less. So already when you're deploying, you get to play as many of your plot cards as you want. So in this case, when you're deploying on 7, you're playing 7 resources worth of cards from your resource row, up to, of course. And with Chancellor Palpatine's effect, you get to play 10 resources worth of cards for 7. That is a massive effect, especially if you're playing this in some kind of ramp shell. You get to puke out a massive amount of board advantage immediately that, if it's not answered by something like a super laser blast, puts your opponent really, really far behind. Now, of course, the power level of an effect like this is going to be massively dependent on the power of the plot cards themselves. If plot cards are good, then this card will be good, of course. But I have faith in FFG so far. The keywords have been fantastic, and going forward, I don't see why it would be any different here. The next one is going to be Padme Amidala on the leader side. When you reveal or discard one or more cards from your hand, you may exhaust this leader and deal 1 damage to a unit. We have seen so many iterations of dealing a damage to a unit. This is just the next one, but the condition here is very interesting, because while you will probably have ways to reveal cards from your hand yourself, with, for example, the new disclose keyword, this also works when your opponent tries to hit your hand, which is becoming a more and more of a common thing in this game. If your opponent tries to force throw you, you get to use Padme. If your opponent pillages you, you get to use it. Very, very good effect. And if there are enough ways to show your hand, which I don't see why there wouldn't be, this leader could be extremely interesting. She does, however, flip on 6 instead of 5, but as a 3/8 body, having 1 extra health over the typical 3/7s that flip for 5, it's a bit below curve. And when flipped, it is more or less the same effect. When you reveal or discard one or more cards from your hand, you may deal 1 damage to a unit. However, this is not limited. So if you do manage to reveal multiple cards or discard multiple cards, and with what we have seen already, that is not uncommon, that is not impossible. If you have a few cards that have on attack disclosed effects, for example, or if you have any card that says draw a card, discard a card, you get to do multiple 1 damage pings all around. So let's take a look. Let's take a look at some of the cards. First, let's go back to Cad Bane for a second and talk about this card. We used it primarily to show what plot is, but let's deep dive a little bit into this and what makes this card very interesting. It's a very good card that they chose to showcase how plot works. So the best way to look at this is that it costs 5, right? So you want to use this with a leader that ideally flips on 5 or 6, get it out as early as possible. And the first thing that comes to mind is, for example, Kira, right? Kira, when flipped, immediately heals everything back to full and deals half of their health and damage. And with Cad Bane, you get to immediately plot him out in the same action that you're deploying Kira. So you get to not only deal half the damage, but if something now has 2 health or less, it immediately dies. And Cad Bane comes out after the Kira, so he will not be affected by that damage. So just already on your leader flip, you now have a 4/4 and a 4/5 in play. You've used up all of your resources, so your opponent has to do whatever they want, and then you just claim the initiative. That's a pretty big swing. So anything that has 4 health or less will immediately die. To a certain extent, the same applies with Cad Bane, the leader, and of course Cad Bane would work well with Cad Bane. You get to flip your leader and then immediately play Cad Bane. You can choose to do your leader's ability first. Your opponent gets to choose something to do 2 damage to, and then this could potentially defeat whatever just got damaged. Let's take a look at some of the other plot cards. Of course, one of the earlier ones revealed is Armor of Fortune, just a straight up 2-cost upgrade, plot +0/+3. It's a very interesting card, and buffing up your leader is pretty good. We've seen that Kylo has been pretty good when deployed with extra upgrades. Will it be worth paying 2 for just 3 extra health? Remains to be seen. At the moment, from what we have, I don't think this is going to be a great card, but it still does do well enough to showcase how plot works. Next up, we have Jar Jar Binks that says, when played, you may give another friendly unit +2/+2 for the phase, and he is plot 2-cost 2/1. This is a very interesting card because when you deploy your leader, you get to immediately take him out. You don't care about his stat line. He is a 2/1. It's just an extra body on the board because why not? But basically, he says if you pay an extra 2, your leader deploys with a +2/+2. And depending on the leader, this could be very, very strong. Think about something like Sabine, right? You get to deploy Sabine on turn 3 as a 4/7 right off the bat. Yes, that buff doesn't last very long, but neither does Sabine's opponent usually. So honestly, this is a very, very strong card. Gives you massive tempo swing, but it is a weak body, so if you don't make good use of that buff, it'll be cleaned up pretty quickly. And finally, when has become now. So this is the card that makes plot go from a cute little effect to a fantastic keyword. And it says play a card with plot from your resources. Put the top card of your deck into play as a resource. First, let's get the elephant out of the room. There's a lot of people talking about this card saying you get to play it and not actually have a plot card because of the way it's worded. If you don't have a plot card, you get to immediately do the second part, which is putting the top card of your deck into play as a resource, so a 1-cost ramp. There is absolutely no way that this makes it through that way. Either it's going to be immediately errata, or it's going to have like a special thing in the rule book. This will not be a 1-cost ramp. However, this does say by paying an extra 1, you get to essentially smuggle out whatever you want. That is very interesting, and it does give you quite the Swiss Army knife of the units to choose from, or not even just units, just cards to choose from your resource row, especially if you're playing a deck that has a ton of plot cards, like the Chancellor Palpatine deck that we just saw, the leader that we just saw. It's a great card overall. It's not as amazing as Smuggle. People have been talking about that, because you still need this in your hand, right? If this itself had a way to be smuggled out, for example, it would have the same benefit of being able to play it when you have nothing in your hand. But it is still a card that can essentially morph into anything in your resource row if you have so many plot cards. Next, let's start looking at some of the Disclose cards. Disclose is honestly one of my favorite keywords. Even plot is looks like a very fun one. I think we're gonna have a lot of fun this set. And this, for example, Captain Typho is a 4-cost 4/5 Sentinel. Already right off the bat, I love this. This game needs more Sentinels. We've already seen how amazing Chirrut is, and instead of reducing your opponent's attack this time around, when this unit is attacked, you may disclose green-white or command heroism, and if you do, heal 1 from your base. And it is a very low disclose cost, and by that I mean you get to usually reveal a single card and get this to work. And if you're playing this in an Amidala deck, when you're attacked, you get to disclose something and then trigger Amidala, and all of this is happening before the attack actually concludes, because this is when this unit is attacked, which means if your opponent's unit only had 1 health, it'll immediately die. Just a great card. Even if this didn't have a disclose effect, a 4-cost 4/5 Sentinel would probably be played. So expect to see this card quite a bit. Next, we have Cyril Karn. We already saw this. You have to disclose at least 2 cards, as I don't believe there is any card in the game, at least not yet, that is 2 red and a villainy. If you do choose a unit, deal 2 damage to that unit, unless your opponent discards a card from their hand. Let's be real here. Versus good players, they will always choose whatever is the least beneficial for you. That said, both of these effects are pretty good for you. It is a 2-cost 2/3 that gets to attack and potentially do 2 damage, potentially discard your opponent's hand. Fantastic. The only problem with this card is that he is not Imperial. What a shame. Next up, we have Furtive Handmaiden. Not quite this close, but still works very well with Amidala. On attack, you may discard a card from your hand if you do draw a card. 1-cost 2/2. That's what you want your 1-cost to be. Very decent stats. On attack, it lets you filter a card from your hand. Potentially triggers Amidala. Great card. Not much to add. No particular traits that are amazing. Next, let's talk about Spy. So this is one of the 2 tokens in this set. People are pretty much imagining that it's going to be experience for the other one, and we'll get to that in a second as to why. But this is the second token that we're going to have, and unlike the 1/1s and the 2/2s that we've seen before, this is a 0/2 with raid 2, and that's very fitting for a Spy because they hit hard, they hurt, but they are hidden. If you find them and if you hit them, they can't really do much about it. And I think on theme, chef's kiss, well done FFG. And so let's take a look at an example of how you can trigger a Spy. We have the next card, which is I Am the Senate. 6 costs, create 5 Spy tokens. Once again, quite the thematic card. 6 costs to get 0.12 worth of 0.10 worth of stats, or potentially 10 worth of stats, is interesting. If your opponent does have a way to somehow hit all of them, that sucks. But honestly, that is a lot of stats for a single card. This has room to be broken. if used correctly. Just think about something silly like using this in a Barris Offie, for example, bringing this out on, if you ramp on turn 2 and then you get to play this on turn 3, that's pretty nasty. All right, next up, we're going to take a look at Anakin Skywalker. We're out of the keyword cards for the moment, at the very least. This is a 3-cost, Cunning Heroism, 3/4, hidden. If you have Padme Amidala as a leader, raid 2. We've already seen that Grand Inquisitor with pretty much the same stat line is seeing a ton of play, and this is going to be no different. Obviously, it's at its best when you play him in a Padme, but just in general, a 3-cost 3/4 hidden could be interesting. And the best thing about this is that it has 3 fantastic traits. It is Force, it is Jedi, it is Republic. Republic hasn't been too relevant until now, but it looks like we're going to be getting a lot of them this set, and we did get quite a bit of Republic synergy in Twilight in set 3 that hasn't seen much use yet. And then, of course, we have Corrupt Politician. Once again, a 1-cost 2/2, this time in Command Villainy. While you control more units than an opponent, this unit gets Sentinel. Once again, best stat line you could hope for in a 1-cost. I guess maybe you would prefer a 3/1, but that depends on the meta. I mean, being a 1-cost gives you room to use interesting effects, like if you play this in a Snoke deck, you get to basically have a turn 1 3/3 that on very not limiting restriction becomes a Sentinel. Great card, not much to talk about it. And now finally, let's talk about the last few revealed cards. I am very sorry about the quality of this. It is out of my control. This is how we've seen them. Major Partagas, Imperial Official, 2-cost 0/6. Overwhelm, strange on a 0 attack card that says when another friendly official unit attacks, this unit gets +2/+2 for this phase. This is a very cute effect, and if you somehow manage to have a ton of officials, and for example the spy token itself is an official, so I guess if you're playing a spy deck, if you did play I Am the Senate, get a bunch of spies, and you have Partagas in play, for each spy that's attacking, he's going to get bigger and bigger in attack. But that, to me, sounds like a very convoluted way to get a big unit. And I don't think this guy will see much play. It's so easy to attack into this and kill it. But it is still a very interesting effect. Next up, we have Cadel Connix. Probably said that wrong. Who cares? 3-cost, 3/2. Aggression, Heroism with the Resistance trait. And Plot, and it says when played you may defeat all non-unique upgrades on a unit. This is a fantastic card, and I would be willing to bet my entire life savings, please don't tell my wife, that this card will be borderline staple in a lot of hero red decks. Being able to just defeat so many upgrades on your leader flip. And the thing is, you don't even need to use this as a plot. You can use this as a basic unit. So essentially, it doubles up as a Fang fighter, but on the ground, that could potentially be resourced and used later. Of course, the downside is that you cannot defeat non-unique upgrades, and that essentially means pilots. So if you're aiming to get rid of pilots, you still need Fang fighter or something along those lines. But this is great for all of those decks that are stacking experiences or stacking shields. I mean, it even works very, very well for someone like, for playing against Kylo. If Kylo flips over and then you flip and use this, there's a good chance that most of the upgrades that Kylo is using are not unique. And finally, the last one we're going to look at is Marva Andor, the beginning of the rebellion here. 3-cost, 3/4 heroism, rebel trait that says when defeated, give an experience token to each friendly rebel unit. Very interesting effect. We've seen that rebels are able to go wide. Will she see played really depends on a lot of factors, but it's a pretty decent stat line, and if you're running a rebel deck, I don't see why you wouldn't play this. Not much to say. Good card. And honestly, that's it, guys. Thank you very much for watching. I did want to keep this short, and I did. And yeah, if you enjoyed what you saw, please feel free to subscribe, like, comment, all that YouTube nonsense. And I will see you guys next time.